You're live.
We're live.
Jenny, we're live.
Apparently, we are live. Okay, well, hello, everybody. My name is Jennie Fields.
My name is Patchett.
And we're here to talk to you about Atomic Love, my new book. Before we do, we're going to turn off comments, even though I'm all really thrilled you're here. Look at all the people here. How nice.
Look.
Here's the book. Anne is smart enough to hold up the cover.
Here's the book.
And let me take the comments and turn them off till later when I will ask for questions. There we go.
Can we just say up front, we don't have a clue what we're doing.
No.
And we do these kinds of things all the time, but not this exact thing.
Yeah.
So if you're really good at the Zoom event or the Facebook Live event, it doesn't mean that you're good at the Instagram Live event.
Yes, and we don't like it that it's a camera that is vertical, because now you see the top of it, and before on Facebook we look like we're in a beautiful garden of flowers.
In a salon.
Yeah.
Right.
Now you see Anne's kitchen.
That's my kitchen. So we're in my breakfast room, and we should tell you right away. Well, I mean, obviously we're friends because we're like physically leaning into each other. But Jennie and I live on the same block. You guys know that song?
Jennie from the block.
She's just Jennie from the block.
Yeah.
And we walk our dogs together every night. My dog is Sparky.
And my dog is Violet, who is deeply, fully in love with Sparky, although Sparky pays no attention to her whatsoever.
It's a little bit of a middle school situation.
It's an unrequited love situation.
So the reason that we are not quarantining from one another is because we see each other every single day, and at this point, if one of us has germs, we're dead. We're dead. But we're going together.
It's true.
Which is kind of tender. And so I'm here to. Wait, now there's a message.
Oh,
Do we need that?
Okay.
We don't need that message.
No.
I'm here to talk to you about your fabulous new book, Atomic Love, which has this terrific cover. I really like this cover.
I love this cover. This is the British cover. It's very different from the American cover. And
yeah.
The first time I saw it, it was Atomic Love.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
And it's got a lovely quote from Anne Patchett on it.
That would be me. Yes. Oh, and I would like to say, since we're doing a Waterstones event, I brought my special Waterstones copy of the Dutch House down. See, they did these astonishing Waterstones. I still haven't figured this out, but they spray painted what looks like Delft tile on the pages, and also I got this incredibly pretty in paper. So Waterstones, we're both just loving you a lot.
Thank you, Waterstones, for letting us take over your site.
Yeah. So, are you feeling bad that you didn't get to go on a UK tour?
No, I really am, because, first of all, my daughter lives in London. And not only does she live in London, she's lived there for 11 years. She lived in England.
I didn't realize she'd been gone that long.
And she is now a UK citizen. So I have a special place in my heart for the UK.
How is it that we're together every day and I didn't know that Chloe was a UK citizen?
She did. She became a UK citizen this year. Yeah,
Way to
because
go,
there's
Chloe.
just so much to talk about. We didn't manage to get to that.
Right. Usually we just talk about the dogs and our novels.
Yeah, right.
We don't have enough time to talk about Chloe's citizenship. So does she have dual citizenship?
She does. She has dual citizenship, and she has to figure out which passport to take on which trip.
Wow. So we didn't mean to start with Chloe, but let's start with Chloe. I'm assuming she's watching now.
She will watch.
Hi, Chloe.
Yeah.
And what does she do? I know.
She is a history professor at Queen Mary, University of London, and she went to Cambridge to get her PhD and fell in love with England and never wants to leave. She's very happy there.
What's her field?
History.
I know.
Art history.
Okay, when you say history, you don't immediately think art history.
But you know what? Art history is in the history department.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
But does she have a particular era that's her specialty?
British art history, mostly the Victorian era.
And do her British students roll their eyes to have an American
I don't know.
telling them.
She's very commanding.
She's very commanding, and she's very good looking.
Yes.
So that that also
Yes,
commands the students' attention. So I have always found that the UK tours are especially exhausting and brutal, which is small. I mean, interesting, it's a small country. You wouldn't think it would be that hard, but they keep putting you on trains and making you go to Wales and pay on wine.
I would love to go to Wales. I would love to just be on a tour there, and I hope that for the paperback that will happen. One of the characters is British in the book.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Eva.
That's a good
Yeah.
a good selling point.
Yes.
It's a good place to start. Okay, so let's talk about how you originally got the idea for this book. Where did this book start for you?
Okay, so this book began with my mother. So my mother was a scientist. She was a biochemist working in cancer research at the University of Chicago. And after, this was right after the war and during the war and after the war. And she always told me that she created this really important, her name was on a really important cancer paper. And, I always thought that was kind of apocryphal. I didn't know whether I believed it or not. It's your mother,
Who believes your mother? Right?
Yeah, and who, polished the floors. And the book is a lot about this too. Very brilliant women doing things that maybe they don't want to do. Mm-hmm. But anyway, when she married, she had to give up her job and give dinner parties for my father because there were men who had come back from the war who needed jobs, and they didn't want women doing those sort of careers. They just didn't have careers for the most part unless they were very, very tough and insisted upon it. And so I wanted to write about a woman who loved science, that was Sparky. Who
hopefully that won't happen again.
Who lived for science and who had to give it up. And so that's where it began. Then also my mother's best friend, who she walked every day to the University of Chicago with, worked in a place called the Met Lab. And she would not tell my mother what she was doing there. And in fact, what she was doing was working on the Manhattan Project.
In Chicago?
In Chicago. So the original, one of the early parts of the Manhattan Project.
We're also having martinis.
Yes, here.
Cheers.
Here's to Atomic Love.
Atomic Love. And you also need to backtrack just a second to explain what the Manhattan Project is, because that's a very American thing.
So the Manhattan Project was where they created the atomic bomb in very little time. And one of the first and most important parts was to create an atomic reaction, which, believe it or not, was created right in the city of Chicago, underneath the bleachers at Stagg Field at the University of Chicago, where they could have blown up the entire town because they really didn't know what would happen. And when I started doing some research on the Manhattan Project, which fascinated me, there was one woman in that portion of the Manhattan Project. Her name was Leona Woods. She was the youngest member of the team and the only woman. And I thought, wow, I want a character who is like Leona Woods in that way. But my character, Rosalind Porter, is different from Leona Woods in other ways.
And circle back to your mom's friend, because I interrupted you to give a brief history of the Manhattan Project.
Right. So she was, as I found out later, she probably, although she would never speak of it, literally would never speak of it, went to her grave with her information.
Really?
Yes.
Even at the end of her life?
Yes.
Wow.
But she was probably some kind of clerical worker on the Manhattan Project, but they were so sworn to secrecy because, loose lips sink ships, and they didn't want anything bad to happen. So I wanted to write about the Manhattan Project. I wanted to write about a female physicist at the time when women were very rarely let into the labs, and who's lost her career. And I also wanted to write about that era. The thing that fascinated me about that era is, you read a lot of books now about World War II. And there's a lot to say about World War II. It was a fight against good and evil. It was very clearly a fight that needed to be won, and people needed to be saved. But after the war, there was this sense of we should all be happy now. We've all been away from each other. We want to be happy and everything should be great. And if you ever see pictures of advertisements from the 1950s, the men are in the gray flannel suits and the women are wearing aprons and they're handing this to their husbands and saying, here, honey, I know you've had a rough day. And, but really underneath all that joy, and I say that with quotation marks, was a sense of scarring and deep sadness from the war. A lot of the men came back and had horrible PTSD, as my character Charlie does in the book. And a lot of the women had given up jobs they loved. During the war, a lot of women were given jobs that they never would have gotten if it hadn't been for World War II. And then they felt important. They felt they were really contributing. And now you're supposed to go home and have lots of babies. So there was unhappiness, quietness about pain. They didn't talk about their pain. And all of this was roiling under the sense of we all should be joyful. And I found that to be a really interesting era to write about. And then on top of it, in 1949, the Russians dropped the first atomic weapon that they had, where they did a test, way before the Americans thought they should have it. And they realized that someone was selling American secrets to the Russians, or they never would have been that far along. Mm-hmm. And that's really what happens in this book. This woman who has lost her chance to work in science, she's selling antique jewelry at Marshall Field's department store in Chicago in 1950, and she is approached by Charlie Sidlow, who was an FBI agent, who said, "We want you to say yes to seeing your old lover." And now her old lover was her colleague. He had betrayed her. She thinks that's why she lost her job, because he said she was unstable after the war. And he's been trying to reach her to say he needs to speak to her. And the FBI says, go ahead and see him, because we think he's selling atomic secrets to the Russians. And so that's really the basis of this book, is spying on someone you once loved, trying to do the right thing at a time when it was difficult to do the right thing, and being brave in the face of all that. And also very much about women's place in the world at that era, because that truly interests me. And it's not just in the main character, Rosalind, but in a lot of subsidiary characters, how they feel about their place in the world after World War II.
Well, why is it that Rosalind's working at Marshall Field's selling jewelry? I mean, she's such a brilliant woman.
Right.
And why isn't she at least teaching science in a high school?
Right. A question that gets asked to her. Basically, Rosalind not only lost her job because they said she was unstable. So she has this feeling that there's this stigma about her that will keep her from getting another job.
And that's what people always say about women. We're unstable.
We're unstable.
We are unstable.
If we have feelings, we're unstable.
Right.
And the feelings that she was having was, after the bomb was dropped, she was horrified. 200,000 people had died from something she'd helped to create. And she was not alone. A lot of scientists, and people don't realize this, a lot of scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project, including Robert Oppenheimer, who was head of the whole Los Alamos part of the project, never wanted the bomb to be dropped. The bomb was created because the Germans were creating a bomb, they thought, they knew, and they needed to counteract it. They felt if the Germans got it, they would just obliterate America. So the Americans began to quickly work on it, but by the time they got there, the Germans had surrendered, and they were still fighting the Japanese. And 70 people from the Manhattan Project signed a petition to President Truman saying, do not drop the bomb. This bomb should never be dropped. They thought of it as a bargaining chip. They thought of it to equalize the world. They never thought of it as a destructive measure. And
they must have.
Well, they knew they were creating a weapon, but they hoped it would never be used.
Right.
And unfortunately, the Secretary of State at the time received this petition and he never gave it to Truman. So Truman never knew that these scientists didn't want to drop. So Rosalind was deeply, deeply depressed after the war. Then this man she was in love with suddenly, inexplicably drops her. And she is devastated, and she wants to get away from science. You know, she feels science has led her to do something so awful. She believed she was working on creating atomic energy. She thought atomic energy, even back then, they thought atomic energy could be used to power the world in a healthy way. And that's what she wanted. That was her dream, which gets played out in the book as well. And that's not what happens. So she's hiding, basically. She's hibernating by selling jewelry, which seems safe, but she's barely making it. Her life's very gray. She can hardly pay for the apartment she chose when she was making good money. And that's when this man wants to see her again, and she feels like he's ruined her life. She doesn't want to see him. But when the FBI says, please see him, because we think he's the person who's selling secrets to the Russians, she begins to feel she needs to do that.
How was it to write a thriller? I mean, this book, it's not only historical, but it really has that element of a thriller, a page-turner.
Yeah. It was hard. I mean, it's not something that you or I normally do, you know.
No.
I always think that I'm writing about characters, you know. You and I have very different ways of writing novels, because I always try to create characters and give them an insoluble problem and let them solve it. And I don't know exactly where it's going. So I have to rewrite and rewrite. This one is very smart because she knows what she's going to do before she writes her book. And she, you know, has it all figured out in her head. But mine always comes, and I think yours do too, absolutely, come from the characters. And so to make the plot as important as it needed to be in this, that was not something that was, native to me. I needed to kind of learn it. And I needed to keep the story changing and moving and surprise you. And that was a lot of work. It was hard. I rewrote this book. I'm not kidding when I say this. 10 times, literally 10 times.
And what does a rewrite mean to you? And again, this goes back to the dogs. So, you know, every night after dinner we walk our dogs. Hey, how was your day? What went on? And you would say, I finished. I'm so happy with the book. I've got it exactly where I want. And then 3 nights later, you're like, oh, now I'm rewriting it.
Well, when I read through it, then I realize what's missing, what's slow, what needs to be redone, who is not fleshed out enough, what can I do to make it better. And unfortunately, there's always a way to make it better. I actually found,
unfortunately.
Yes, I've actually found that lately when I'm writing emails, I'm constantly rewriting them, and sometimes I have to say, just stop that already.
I do that. I do that. It's like 2 sentences, and I'm moving words around, and I'm like, what
am I doing
with my life? Yeah,
right, exactly.
I wrote that email 10 times.
Well, I mean, however, when I was talking about how you have it all figured out in your head, I do remember the time that we were walking on a Friday, and I was going to go away for the weekend. You said, I think I'm almost done with the Dutch house. Yay, that's great. That's so wonderful. So I come back from the weekend wherever I went, and I came back and I said, so did you finish the Dutch house? And she says, no, I threw it away.
Well, it was terrible, though. I mean, it was. I made a huge mistake, like on page 35. So there was nothing to do. You know, it's sort of like if you're knitting a sweater and you drop a stitch really early on, you just have to rip the whole thing out. You just do.
Sometimes, right.
But you're not talking about that kind of a revision.
No. But I am talking about enough that it's not just, copy editing. I'm not just playing with the sentences, because as Anne will tell you, you can always change a sentence to be better. And remove words. The more words you remove, the better. But no, I'm really adding something. I'm realizing, you read it and you made comments, and your comments were right on, and I needed to look at that, So, other people had read it and said, oh, this is great, except this was a question I had. And sometimes you just have to go in, and it's not just a little bit. It usually is something that becomes like the whole thing has to somehow respond to a question. So.
Well, you had a huge shift in your career around this book too. So which led to a lot of editing and rewriting. So talk about that.
Well, so I've published 5 books. This is my 5th. And Anne and I, we've had the same path, really.
Yeah.
We both went to Iowa. We both went to the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. And for like 25 years apiece, we had the same agent. In fact, sometimes the agent would mention her, and I knew she was there, and, but I hadn't met her yet. And so the day came when Anne left the agent. The agent was just not functioning well for either of us anymore. Anne left and was so happy. And she said...
It was like a really, really good divorce.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she said, you really need to find a new agent. And I was hesitant because, it's like a marriage in a way.
No, it really is. And had you started Atomic Love at that point?
Oh yeah. I had.
Because there was a book before that the agent in question was kind of like, no, not so much.
Yeah, but she said that about everything.
Yes,
Everything. She said that about Atomic Love. Mm-hmm. I had started it, but I found this just incredible agent that I just through a friend of mine, Jonas Zeldis McDonough, who is also a novelist, said, you really should send it to my agent. And I'm so happy I did. It just changed everything. And this book, there was a lot of fighting.
Let me stop you there. When you say it just changed everything, I want you to say what that means. Because, of course, I got a new agent, and I could say it just changed everything. But our new agents, we got different new agents. So what do you mean it changed everything?
Well, this agent was really, truly enthusiastic about it, but she was also clear on all the different editors who would be the right person to send it to. Did she
give you editorial suggestions?
She did give me some editorial suggestions, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sent it out, and we had, a lot of people really interested in this book, like immediately. And the person that I ended up with in America was at Penguin Random House, and she was the editor of Where the Crawdads Sing. And
I wonder, is that such a huge thing in your country?
I think it is.
Where the Crawdads Sing?
Yeah,
it's going on for all
ever.
eternity here.
It's just forever.
Yeah.
And then I got the most incredible editor in London, who also was so enthusiastic about it, Gillian Taylor. I hope you're watching.
Hi, Gillian.
And her entire crew have been brilliant and really excited about the book. And there are days when a letter from Gillian just raised my spirits so much. And so it's Michael Joseph Books, which is part of Penguin Random House, and I guess it's not Random House over there; it's just Penguin. Mm-hmm. And it just was the best choice. And so we've also sold it in 8 languages, and there are people sending me questions about that every day. Is this what you mean? What does this mean in English? Things like that. So it's been exciting. It's been fun. My other books did fine, but this has really been special. So.
Yeah. So this was your big breakout book, and then there was a pandemic.
And then there was a pandemic, and it was heartbreaking to, because, you hope this is the book that's going to get you on the lists and that everybody's going to read. And, there was a big question, are we going to wait to put this book out? And that's happened.
I mean, we talked about that on many of the dog walks.
We did.
Are you going to wait?
Your advice was wait as long as you can, as I recall. But
I own a bookstore.
Yeah,
I own
does.
a bookshop in Tennessee, or I own half of a bookshop in Tennessee. So I am the go-to person when somebody is publishing a book and has book questions.
Right. Well, and actually, her bookshop has done very well during the pandemic.
We've done
a lot of ideas.
We haven't gone out of business, but
well, you haven't had to let go any employees, and that's
still paying everybody's salary. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't remember where we were.
What
to do with the pandemic.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So basically, the idea was we could wait, but everybody's going to wait. And suddenly there's going to be an onslaught of books, and there even are already, because, we couldn't even print ARCs in America. We were able to print ARCs. That's the advanced reader's copy that you send to editors, and you send it to
newspapers, magazines, bookstores. Yeah.
Right. And we couldn't. We had to do it as an ebook because they literally didn't have the open shop to do it. The printing shops were closed in America. And I hear you guys might have a shutdown soon, a complete shutdown. I hope not. I know that you are partially shut down as of yesterday. So, their offices, they've told them not to work in offices if they can help it. So, bookstores, we'll see whether they stay open. But there's always online. Just remember, Waterstones does have a very big online presence. So,
yes, and a lot of places, like our store is still closed, but people can come and we will take a book outside and give it to you in a bag. So there are all sorts of different ways to get books, but it is really hard to get people's attention.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that if it's a name person that you already know, and you say, oh, John Grisham has a new book, or William Boyd has a new book, then you're going to go check it out because you already know them. But for names that you're not as familiar with, it's much harder to get books into people's hands. And people are not walking through bookstores, I know, in central London, and maybe a little bit more in smaller shops, but or smaller towns where Waterstones might have a presence. But it is hard. So,
when did you go to the UK first? What was your first trip?
Actually, that's a good question. I went to the UK when I was 16 years old, and I had graduated high school. I was about to go to college, and I got the special semester abroad to go to Oxford.
I didn't know this.
You didn't. I don't think we've ever talked about it.
At 16?
Yes. And my parents, I had a very difficult father, and it was the idea of leaving home was just brilliant. I could not wait to leave home. And I went to England, and I fell in love. I mean, it seems very appropriate my daughter should live in England, because the minute I hit England, I thought, this is the world I was meant to be in. I loved it so much. And, on the weekends, I'd go to Cornwall, or I'd go to Lincoln, or I'd go to Scotland, or, we just saw as much of England as we could on the train. And I truly fell in love with it. I came back a completely different person. It was the first time I really was away from home.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that happened before I went to college. And then I went to college, and I thought, well, these rooms aren't nearly... Are you okay, Sparky? These rooms aren't nearly as nice as the rooms that I had at Oxford. Those are really nice. I had a sitting room of my own at Oxford. And here I'm sharing with 4 girls at the University of Illinois. So, I just loved England so much. And I've been back many, many times. I've probably been back 20 times. And... I love it. I mean, I just can't get enough of England. And I like to go to places people don't generally go. Maybe you all do. I don't know. But like the Isle of Wight, or the Orkneys, or the Shetlands, or, just I love seeing every part of England. I want to see it all. And I hope my grandkids who will grow up there will love it as much as I do, and my daughter does too.
The most exciting thing that happened in Tennessee is... How long ago we got a nonstop flight?
Oh, but I think it's probably been put on hold because of the pandemic.
Oh, well, probably. Probably we can't go.
Yeah, I don't know. We have a nonstop flight to England. Well, maybe there's one a day now.
The big excitement in our world.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about your career in advertising. You said something earlier about constantly taking words out of sentences. And I feel like that's something that I got first as a journalist. And because I was always writing for newspapers and magazines, and something had to be 500 words or 1,300 words, and I was always going for a specific word count and combing out words. And now that I'm writing children's books, it's the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always thinking, I've got to, how can I say this exact same thing, but in 28 fewer words. And so how did advertising influence your life as a writer?
Although I really believe it's a different part of my brain. I used to say I was really good at advertising ideas in the morning and really good at writing fiction in the evening, because it was truly a different place. But on the other hand, if you have to write 30 seconds to say 900 things, you learn how to say them in the least amount of words possible. And the older I get, the more I cut. I mean, I think if you find an extra word in Atomic Love, I want you to email me and tell me, because I've been working to get them out of there. I mean, truly, I do believe that less is more when it comes to writing, and it should be as crisp, as clean, as simple as possible. And advertising definitely did affect that. And I was in advertising for so many years, I don't want to give you the number. But, I was raising my daughter, and who I was single after her dad and I split up. And I was raising my daughter, and I would then work out, so I put her to bed at like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, then I'd work out. By the time I wrote, it was like 11:30, and I wrote till like 1:30, and that's when I got my writing done in those days. You learn to do what you have to do. I used to do it at lunchtime, then they took our lunch away from us.
That's incredible. So, I think that for so many of us, and certainly for me, when I think about my early career as a writer, it seems so dreamy because it was before the internet. It was before cell phones and social media, and my life was really my own. My time was my own. And now I'm so bombarded every minute. For me to find 2 quiet hours to write feels like a miracle. Whereas for you, living in Manhattan or living in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan, having a child, being on your own, and doing this huge job and still writing every night.
It was exhausting. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to be young and have just endless amounts of energy in order to pull it off. And, I don't have quite that much energy anymore. But I'm glad I did it. It was the one thing that was my identity. And I think you can relate to this. It's like you were a cocktail waitress, but you weren't a cocktail waitress. You were a writer. You always knew that,
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point because, of course, I never thought of myself as a cocktail waitress, but I did think of myself as a journalist. Although I always say, for me, writing nonfiction is like a really good ice skater. Sarita Bonale or something, skating figure eights. It was just so easy and basic for me to write nonfiction, but it was still writing in a way.
Yeah, but I'm sure you feel also it's not the same as when you're working on your own.
No.
It's just a very different feeling, and these are the kind of things we talk about when we walk our dogs.
Just go get your dog. Bring your dog to your phone or however you're watching this thing.
Yeah. Or I'm telling Violet to stop barking because she wants to protect Sparky.
Violet
from
barks
every dog.
a lot at all the other dogs in the neighborhood that we pass every night.
Yeah.
Do you love science? Were you interested in science when you were young? Did you ever think about being a scientist?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. Weirdly enough, I always tested just great in science, which always surprised me. I'm very bad at math. My father was a math genius. My father is one of those people who could see colors when associated with numbers. I think it's called synesthesia. And if you said, what's 1,592 times 246, he would just tell you without even thinking about it. He saw the numbers in his mind.
Oh, interesting.
So he was a math genius. My mother was clearly a science genius, left to give dinner parties, which is so sad, although she measured everything perfectly. But, and so I didn't think I would be good at science, but I always did great in school in science. And I've always been interested. And in the end, I worked in advertising on a lot of, in America, we advertise drugs. I know that's hard to believe in England, but we do. Yeah. And I really understood the drugs. I met the man who invented ibuprofen. He was British. He worked for Boots. He never made a penny, but he was a lovely man. And he invented ibuprofen, naproxen, which is a leaf in America. And, and I could understand the science behind those things. Mm-hmm. So I guess I did. But I always wanted to do something creative. I always wanted to paint.
You're a wonderful painter.
So are you. Yeah, we both. Yeah, you are. But we both have a lot of creative juices we need to.
And knitting,
and I used to write music. I wrote a lot of jingles that people are still singing to make fun of advertising.
That's very funny.
Yeah. But I all of that interests me and still does. If only there wasn't the internet, because it's like the siren call, and this woman is not on social media. She's much smarter than I am.
No social
on the
media.
other hand, I'm glad you are all on social
That's
media.
right.
Or
Exactly.
you wouldn't be watching us.
Right.
So.
We're happy for you, but no.
Should we see if there's any questions?
We could see if there are any questions.
Here, let's see. Okay.
We'll probably just disconnect and do this all wrong.
Turn on commenting. If anybody has any questions, you can. I see people are there, but
Okay.
okay. Live video. No, you can't be in our live video. I'm sorry, but you can ask questions. All you have to do is type in your question. Let me in your live now. No, we're not going to do that. I'm sorry. We're not allowed to do that. Oh, well, somebody just ordered my book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
If people have questions, that'd be great. I have a question. What makes a heroine, either modern or from the past? Well, that's a very good question from Jillian Taylor. I think a heroine is somebody who has the insight and bravery to do something that we would like to do. Or at least makes us question, would I have that inside me to do that? Somebody who knows right from wrong and is complex enough that you can relate to her. And somebody who you say, that could be me, In this case, it's a woman who's asked to do something that is fairly scary. So that's a good question, though. Let's see. Can you tell me a bit about you both and your books? Anne, how many books have you published?
You would think that I would know the answer to that question.
I'm surprised you don't.
I think I have published 8 novels and 3 books of nonfiction.
Wow.
I think that's correct. And 2 picture books. I just published my 2nd picture book this week. So, yeah, things have been busy. You?
I've published 5 novels. I originally started writing short stories, and I've created a lot of advertising campaigns.
Didn't we all originally start? That's what they teach you here. They just teach you how to write short stories, and then you realize you don't want to write short stories, but nobody taught you how to write a novel.
You both create characters that stuck with me. Oh, that's nice. Saying that we create characters who stay with us, stay with them long after they finished reading. How do you approach your characters' work? Do you map them out before you start writing? You talk to that.
I do. Yeah, I do. I think about them for a long time. I think about all sorts of different aspects of their personalities that I don't put in the books. And it's really like getting to know somebody. Good example. You walk your dog, and then one day you see this person you've seen before, and your dogs sniff at each other, and you start to talk, and then, you run into each other again, and you share some facts, and over time, we knew each other for a long time before we actually buckled down and became friends.
That's true.
And I feel like that's what it's like to get to know your characters. You don't plan on it, but it just kind of evolves, and you have to pay attention. And then there are always these lovely moments where I'm like, I didn't know that you went to the UK when you were 16.
Yeah.
And characters are like that too. When you think that you've got it all down, they're still evolving.
Right. I also, the one part that I really do plan out is my characters. I mean, I really need to know my characters, and I think about them all the time. And, you know, the time when you're most creative, weirdly enough, is when you're falling asleep or in the bathtub or staring at the wall or on
Church.
on the tube or...
Like the best reason to go to church.
Church.
Church and the symphony.
The symphony's
are the two
really
places
good.
that I'm just like so creative.
So I do think about my characters a lot before I start writing and really try to understand some of the complexities of them. This is Sparky.
This is Sparky.
Let's see.
He has complexities
we
too.
in the Netherlands love Commonwealth and the Dutch House. That's nice.
Thank you.
What's the average time it takes to write your novels? She's quicker than me. It takes me 5 years. It really does. I do a lot of research because mine is set in a different era.
Yeah, and as Elizabeth McCracken once said, it's all a trick of accounting, because I think about my books for such a long time that when I finally sit down and start to write them, they do sometimes go quicker, but then sometimes they don't. They bomb, and then you got to start over again.
Oh, but when you did, you rewrote that really, really quickly.
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a big gap between when I threw it away and when I finally figured it out. But once I did, I got going. Is the dog selling books? They
say dogs and babies sell books. So
dogs and babies. Look,
yeah.
Sparky, what are you reading? It's Atomic Love.
Hold the dog higher.
There you go. All right.
How do you decide on a time period? What's your favorite to write about? Well, for me, like I said, I was really interested in writing about the 50s because nobody's been writing about them. I mean, the Cold War is really just new territory that fascinates me. And
new old territory.
New old territory.
Right.
I mean, there's just been so much done about World War II, and it's really more than I think there should be at this point. I didn't want to add to that pile, so I wanted to write about the Cold War and what that felt like, and the fear, and like I said, the pain underlying the happy family that we were all supposed to be, with the 2.5 children and the woman with the cocktail tray giving it to her husband. So that was what interested me. My new book that I'm just beginning to do some research on, I believe, will be about the civil rights movement in the American South. We live in the South. Nashville they call it the New South,
and it's also the place where a lot of the action of the civil rights movement took place.
Yeah,
right here.
John Lewis, who was a very important civil rights figure who died this year, he went to college here in Nashville, and he was involved in something called the lunch counter sit-ins, where people of color sat at the lunch counter at the Woolworth store, and they were not allowed to do that, but they did it. They were very peaceful. They, were really following Gandhi. And it's just a fascinating era, and I wanted to write about that.
Yeah.
So, well, we're at 2:12. What do you think?
I don't know. Is there anything else? Of course, I can't see. So
I can't. Well,
does Waterstones want their Instagram account back?
Nice comments, everybody. Thank you.
We did get all dressed up. That's sort of the secret of the pandemic.
Yes.
Is that, I don't know about you, but we really look bad all the time. Well, Jennie looks nice. Jennie puts on jewelry every night to walk the dogs, which I find just so fascinating. I mean, look. She's wearing the real stuff.
It is the real. My mother collected these in the 50s, so I have to wear the real stuff.
Yeah.
But we do. We normally see each other in yoga pants and with dog leashes.
So we're just trying to up our game.
We are. We're trying to be a little bit 50s.
Yes.
I hope you think we did a good job.
And I will wash my face because I don't ever wear mascara unless I'm doing Instagram Live.
Yes, but look at her. She looks so beautiful.
There you go.
Well, thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much.
It's been a joy to see you, and we're going to try and save this, but first we're going to end it. So we're going to save it and give it back to Waterstones. Thank you, Waterstones.
Thank you, Waterstones.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, we went
Absolutely.